Good afternoon or good morning, folks. Welcome to our second AASHTOWare OpenAPI webinar. My name's Joe Brewer. I'm an IT manager with the state of Michigan. I work for the Michigan Department of Transportation. I also volunteer my time as the chair of the AASHTOWare Data Integration Oversight Team. And our main goal has been to oversee development and implementation of the AASHTOWare OpenAPI. I've been in this role since October 2021, and I have the pleasure of working with several other volunteers from other agencies, as well as AASHTOWare staff and WSP. And WSP is the contractor chosen to help develop the AASHTOWare OpenAPI. The OpenAPI has been successfully in production since July of 2023. Today's webinar will follow up on our November webinar. In that webinar, we reviewed APIs that are in production, and they involve e-ticketing, census data, and cross-project data between AASHTOWare project sites. Today, we're going to discuss a couple of APIs that are still under development. We will review Asset Tracker and Quantimate, and we're going to focus mostly on the business side of things. But we'll cover the technical aspects at a high level. Our next webinar is still being planned, and we'll finalize that after the AASHTOWare Connect meeting that's going to be held here in April. We will be sending surveys out to get your feedback on today's session, as well as suggestions for future topics. A quick housekeeping item, only presenters can talk. Everyone else, if you have a question, please use the QA button at the bottom of your screen, and we will be monitoring that and try and answer your questions as we go. So I just wanted to spend a couple minutes on what is an API. And for those of you that were at the November webinar, I apologize for repeating here. But just really quick, what is an API? It's a way for different apps and systems to communicate with each other over the internet. And an API defines the rules and formats for exchanging data and information. It allows apps to access data and services from different sources, platforms, enables apps to reuse existing code and functionality without reinventing the wheel, facilitates interoperability and integration among different systems, and enhances security and privacy by limiting the access and exposure of sensitive data. But why do we need AASHTOWare OpenAPI? We have data silos. Many of the AASHTOWare products function independently and leading to isolated data sets, and they're difficult to share or integrate. Because of that, we have limited integration. Without a common API, products cannot easily exchange data. And so the open API will increase efficiency. Pardon, I skipped the slide here. I apologize. Benefits of the AASHTOWare OpenAPI: establish standards for accessing and managing data. Some of the traditional barriers allow for cheaper and quicker maintenance on data integrations, the ability to maybe do some low-effort implementation of data integration, leveraging existing API-based integration, build once, use often, and resources available to make use of the system with little or no training. Here's some stats I wanted to share with you real quick. These are from the last quarter. 163 registered users, 15 active APIs, over 100,000 requests. We have participation from 24 agencies, and we have inquiries from approximately 40 companies about the OpenAPI. And over the last quarter, over 6 gigabytes of data has been transferred. Today's topics, we've got Chad and Nita and Havel from Infotech, and they're going to give us a view of Tracker. And we have Mr. Todd Berglund from Minnesota that's going to talk to us about Quantimate. And then finally, Cedric Booknight from WSP will go over some of the recent changes to the AASHTOWare OpenAPI. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the folks from Infotech. So Nita, take it away.
All right, I'll actually take over here. Hi, everybody. My name's Chad Richards. Thanks, Joe. I'll be doing the presentation, and Nita and Naval are going to be helping out with our technical side questions. So our presentation is on the application of AASHTOWare OpenAPI and how we're building it out with Asset Tracker. Again, I'm Chad Richards, and then Nita and Naval are helping out with questions today. So what is Asset Tracker? Asset Tracker is a tool that's meant to connect AASHTOWare project data at any phase from early design all the way through completed project to an asset ID. And for all of those that are familiar with AASHTOWare project, it's very driven off of pay items. So we are maintaining pay item data at the asset level, which rolls up to a total quantity item, which is then linked in with AASHTOWare project. And Asset Tracker maintains that connection between the data at the asset pay item level and connects that all the way through into AASHTOWare project so that we can maintain that connection between asset level quantities and items in AASHTOWare project. And we chose to move forward with a SaaS development for this tool, and we're utilizing that AASHTOWare OpenAPI to maintain that connectivity. And we did this because originally this was meant to go into AASHTOWare project proper, but after analyzing it, it was going to be very disruptive to the base product. And we decided that using a SaaS approach and connecting via APIs, we were going to be able to reach in and grab data and then push data to AASHTOWare in a much less disruptive fashion by only touching AASHTOWare project where we had to. So we moved forward with this development, and it gave us the ability to work in tandem with AASHTOWare project. And then also, benefit for the agencies is being able to have this software updated as needed and frequently, without intervention and testing from the agencies to make sure that it was going to work and fit their processes. This is fairly advanced, so we'll probably see some changes coming down the road as all of this technology evolves. So we decided this was a good approach to be able to pivot with changes in the industry. We have 7 funding agencies: Connecticut, Idaho, Kansas, Nebraska, Ohio, Oklahoma, and South Carolina are all participating in this project, and they're participating on our AET overseeing the development. So now we'll get into some of the specifics on how we're integrating this with AASHTOWare project. Similar to the data analytics SaaS model, we're using agency options to be able to set up the URLs and the tenants to provide all of that connection configuration from the AASHTOWare side. So this is all set up in AASHTOWare. And then all we have to do to make Asset Tracker available inside of the roles is we have this Get Asset Tracker single sign-on token, which enables the link directly inside of AASHTOWare project. So we don't have a separate login or anything. It's accessed directly from AASHTOWare project proper. And then down at the bottom here, we have our application integrations. And this is how we control role access and role access rights within the system. Is we have our integrations down here tied to roles, which then in turn on the Asset Tracker side, we have integrations available. And we can see here we have a couple of integrations. So depending on the role, the active role that the user has on when they open Asset Tracker, it's going to use those access rights for that role to control what that user can see. So this is how we replicate roles inside of Asset Tracker. So if you have a designer that only has access to cost estimates and concepts, for example, when they log in using their design user role, they're only going to have access to that same information in Asset Tracker. So there's not a lot of redundant setup in roles to be able to utilize Asset Tracker. And now we'll just go through kind of how they interact together. So we start with a project or a concept in AASHTOWare Project and create a cost estimate. And then we utilize those APIs to be able to connect to that project and cost estimate when we have an asset tracker design. So that design is directly linked to the cost estimate, and we can pick up all the attributes off of that cost estimate and concept and attach it to that asset tracker design. So we're inheriting the things like the spec book, and all of that information is coming down as part of the asset tracker design. And then we'll move to the bottom here where we start adding assets and asset items to that design. And we can see here we have external APIs where we can connect that data from outside systems. So if we have GIS information we want to bring in to assign to existing assets that we're going to bring into our design, we can do that here. And then also APIs that will be available to be able to connect that design system so that we can get that asset level pay item information inside of Asset Tracker. And then from there, we can maintain that data and roll that up into total quantity items, which are then passed through to either the project or the cost estimate, depending on the life cycle, where we're at in the life cycle of that project. So we take these total items and they're replicated up here in AASHTOWare Project. And the link is maintained between these. So as changes happen in the design and that design information is updated, we update our total quantity items, which then in turn will update our cost estimate or project items. And then next, we flow into construction. So when we utilize that transition to construction and AASHTOWare Project builds out that contract and the contract project and all of the children entities within that contract, Asset Tracker recognizes that that transition has happened, and it locks down those as-let asset component quantity items, and it also builds out the as-built asset component quantity items so that we can keep track of the items as they're built on the project. So we can see here we have a link between assets and our DWR item posting, where inside of our DWR item posting, we can assign an asset in the posting, and it's going to reference our assets in our asset tracker design and pass that information along to our DWR item posting. And then once that posting has been saved and approved, those quantities that were posted in that posting will flow back down into our as-built, so we can keep track of the quantities assigned to that particular asset. And then we can see down here we also have external APIs opened up for the assets so that we can gather that information and provide that to the GIS systems, asset management, any of that for long-term storage and maintenance. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on how the data flows through and how we maintain that connection with asset items. AASHTOWare Project maintains separate pieces for cost estimate items, project items, and then contract project items. And that data flows through the system as that project evolves. But we can see here at the top, we're maintaining that connection in Asset Tracker to those same asset items throughout the life cycle. So all the way from early design all the way through construction, we're maintaining that connection back to those asset items. And then we have a few other APIs. So we utilize APIs for those login credentials, as I mentioned a little bit. That's all single sign-on via that embedded link, and you'll see it in a little demo video I have. where we can sign in directly from AASHTOWare Project, like I said, without any other sign-in screens that we need to work through. And then we're also utilizing APIs to bring in the agency's workflows so that we can establish workflow restrictions on what happens in Asset Tracker, so that if designers don't have access anymore, they don't want changes to pass through all the way to the project, then they have the ability to restrict that inside of Asset Tracker. And then lastly, we have our data syncs and validation. We use API calls to do the validations between AASHTOWare Project and Asset Tracker, so that when things change in Asset Tracker does a validation and informs the user that there are differences between Asset Tracker and AASHTOWare Project, and gives you the ability to sync that data and make those changes to make sure that both Asset Tracker and AASHTOWare Project are in sync. And so now I'll walk you through a little video showing how the system interacts. So we're going to start here in AASHTOWare Project on a concept. I've already set up the concept and the cost estimate, and we've already set up all of the prerequisite data here. So we have a category in our cost estimate, and we'll go here to the item pricing worksheet and just show we don't have any items yet. We haven't synced anything up to AASHTOWare Project yet. So now we're going to open Asset Tracker, and you'll see the Asset Tracker link there under estimation. So this is going to go through the single sign-on service and open Asset Tracker. And we already have a design set up to save some time. So we're going to navigate to that design. And now that we're in here, we can see the information of what we're connected to. We can see that concept, that cost estimate we're connected to. We've already got assets built out in this design file. We can add assets as needed. And we've already got some asset items. And you'll see there we have the ability to import, and we can also add manual. So we're going to go ahead and add a manual item here. So we can show the process of adding individual items as needed. We can assign that to a design group, an asset ID, category, quantity, supplemental description, all those normal attributes that are on items in AASHTOWare Project. So we can see that item's been added, and we can see all of the assets that these individual asset items are tied to. And then here under total quantity items, we can see how those roll up to the items that we're going to pass over to AASHTOWare Project. And if we hit that drop down, we can see which individual asset items make up that total quantity item. So we can see that breakdown. And now under design info, it's running the validation, and it tells me that I have 4 items that I need to sync over to AASHTOWare Project. So we'll do the synchronization. That's going to send our items over to AASHTOWare Project. We're in sync. The items have been added. And now when we navigate back to AASHTOWare Project and refresh, it's going to show those items inside of my cost estimate. And so now if we go back to Asset Tracker, we can make our changes and updates to those design elements, and we'll change the quantity here. We can see it was 11,000 total with the split of 5,000 and 6,000. We're going to drop it down to 5,000. And now we're going to sync that back over to AASHTOWare Project to update those quantities. So now when we go back into AASHTOWare Project, we can see it says 11,000. We're going to refresh that. And we can see we now have a quantity of 10,000. So it did the updates. And so that's where we're at today. Where we're at in the development process, estimation and pre-construction has been completed. We're currently underway with finishing up the construction and materials side. Contract administration is completed, and we're working on and finishing up the item postings right now to be able to sign those assets in those item postings. The remaining work we have to do, we're going to start working on configuring those endpoints for the external data and testing out that process of bringing in external data via those APIs. And then lastly, just some more user interface streamlining for, that good user experience. Any questions?
You see, Nita's been working very hard to answer questions. So thank you for those folks that have been putting your questions out there. And Nita and Havel, thank you guys for being right up on top of that. Wait just a minute, see if anybody's typing any more questions, but we'll give folks just a few seconds here. And then we'll probably turn it over to Todd Berglund here in a second. So there's one, looks like there's one new one just came in. You guys, do you see that? Do you want to type it or you want to talk it? So
we can address that live. So we do have the design group there. So if you do have separate design groups that are utilizing a design, so if your bridge area is working on their design and your road group is working on their area, we have the ability to filter those items so that users aren't duplicating that effort, and those will still roll up to overall total quantity items, but they can still break all of their elements down by the assets that they're working on. And they can filter that down so that they don't have to view everything that road design and electrical and those other groups are working on.
perfect. Thank you, Chad.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys. Appreciate it very much. We'll gonna turn it over to Todd Berglund now to talk a little bit about Quantimate. So Todd, it's all yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brewer. Are you hearing me okay? Just double checking.
Yes, sir. Can hear you loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I guess, first of all, I just want to thank Joe for all his efforts in guiding the AASHTOWare API. He's certainly been very instrumental in moving this effort forward, and I certainly want to thank him for all his efforts in that area. So thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Well, I'm here to talk to you about the Quantimate project, and just a brief description of what Quantimate is. It's the integration of OpenRoads Designer and the AASHTOWare software, moving quantities from CAD into AASHTOWare Project Pre-Construction and AASHTOWare Project Estimation. So this was an effort that I'll talk about between AASHTO, Infotech, and Bentley. And MnDOT kind of spearheaded the initial conversations, and other states have joined on since our initial meetings in May. So to give you a brief history of how quantities have worked at MnDOT, and it may be that way in your state, but we started out really down the quantity path of moving data between Bentley and at the time transport, for those of you that can remember that, through a technology called Quantities Manager. It came out of a project that we put together with Bentley Geopack at the time. And our goal was to get quantity information passed so that our pre-construction manager wouldn't have to enter quantities. You know, as time progressed, standards came out, you know, we adopted those standards for how we would move data between those systems. And, you know, fast forward, we use that DNC manager, quantities manager within, at the time, Bentley MicroStation. We used it for many years. And to this date, or up until the point of we move forward with Open Roads Designer, we were using the quantities manager to generate reports and move quantity information. Now, quantities manager really never gained a full scale adoption amongst the agencies. There were really 4 DOTs that kind of glommed onto it, for lack of a better word. You know, it had its good points and bad points, like any software. So as we move forward, we saw ORD on the horizon, and we knew that quantities manager was going to go away, and we needed to figure out how we were going to move that information from the new ORD workspace, which is the Open Roads Designer, into AASHTOWare, what's now AASHTOWare Project, pre-construction and estimation. So in May of 2023, we gathered the troops, so to say. We met with AASHTO staff, Bentley developers and managers, Infotech developers and managers, and then MnDOT staff. We talked about how we wanted to move this data. We talked about the technologies and what were the next steps. So we had a plan, and one of the goals coming out of that meeting was to develop a prototype that would be used or that we would demonstrate at IHEAP in Des Moines, Iowa, in September of 2024. At IHEAP, we presented that prototype, and I'll show you a bit of that on a slide moving forward here, or a small video. And then we also demonstrated it at the PUG. So we took it on the road and demonstrated what we had done to this point. And then there was a bit of radio silence as we went through the holidays, the Thanksgiving and the December holiday. And then finally in February, we got together and Bentley, with Bentley and Infotech, and Bentley talked about some additional enhancements that they had made to the prototype. And then we talked about what our next steps were for the project. And I will talk about them later on, and be looking for some additional information from hopefully those on the call. So this is how we started once we left that meeting in May. We knew that initially we wanted to keep it very scaled down to just a few DOTs before we started to broaden it out into more DOTs. And so our initial core working council was MnDOT, Michigan, Connecticut, and Mississippi. And then the goal of the working council, we knew that they were item type states that used item types in ORD, and each state kind of did things a little differently. They may have estimated differently. They may have had funding on projects. They may not have had funding. They may have used assets and deep into assets like Connecticut. And that, you know, as everyone knows, there are individual nuances as you go into every DOT. So we met first with that group. We interviewed them. Bentley interviewed them, and we found out how they did business. And then once we formed the working council, we gathered the additional states that were interested in the project. And our goal was to, notify them and update them on where we were. And we will continue to do that as we move forward again now with our next steps. So why Quantimate? And I think Joe has really alluded to a lot of them. I think the big ones, and I'll just touch on the big ones here, is digital delivery is a high priority for every DOT. And I have been involved in quite a bit of that within MnDOT, and bottom line, standards are going to be very important in order for digital delivery to work. And meaning, now we're at a point where we have a standard interface for connecting applications with the OpenAPI. Agencies are investing heavily in IFC, and AASHTOW's invested heavily in IFC. And we know that standard will ultimately play a role as we move forward. DOTs have moved to cloud technologies, and a lot of DOTs, and I'll speak specifically from ours, are migrating to enterprise systems. The days of the siloed systems are gone, and it's a lot of those systems that we used to do minute little details are starting to go away, and the big enterprise systems are doing a lot of those workflows for us. And I guess another plug for the OpenAPI, what we saw in that from MnDOT's perspective was a build once, use often scenario. And we were really encouraged by that. And that was why we knew it was going to be a big part of our puzzle. So just a very high level architecture diagram. I'll start in the lower left corner because that's really where things start. What happens is in the lower left corner, this is where the item types are generated, and that's where the information is housed within the CAD file on the particular elements that you design as you're designing your project. Now, there's a two-way feed. AASHTOWare Project outputs item information and moves it to OpenRoads Designer. And then OpenRoads Designer takes and moves information up into the infrastructure cloud or through the iModel. And then we pass that information from the iModel into AASHTOWare Project estimation currently using the AASHTOWare OpenAPI. It's a near real-time sync at this point. Data is pushed and pulled quite easily as you move quantities between both systems. So how is it set up? Joseph Teferi, our admin at MnDOT, who is exceptional and does a very good job of making AASHTOWare work properly and all that. What we did is we developed an interface, and we called it the Quantimate API. And we sent key values through the OpenAPI and made a call to a URL that called the contract data within AASHTOWare. And all the key values are hashtagged out because they're unique to MnDOT, but these calls are very easy to set up. You develop the API within AASHTOWare and under the custom processes, and then that information can be sent to and from the CAD file. So as we move forward with the project, first phase was really to take advantage of the estimation piece of of AASHTOWare project. Designers wanted the ability to do regression pricing and to do average bid-based pricing. And that was the first step in our prototype. And for those of you that are estimating states, you know that estimation software is a very powerful software. So next up, I just want to show you our prototype as it first was developed, and then we presented at IHEAP in Iowa. So what you're seeing right now is the data being pushed up into the infrastructure cloud, or iModel. Apologize for that button. Pay item and quantity information is moved from AASHTOWare project into ORD and then pushed up into the infrastructure cloud, or iModel. We publish all this information: quantity, description, item number, and then ultimately what we will do is, as we move forward with that, is we will take and push that data back to AASHTOWare project through a early estimating concept. We created one called QTM. We pushed that back, and what's going to happen is it's going to come back and provide a cost estimate, either a regression or average bid-based estimate. So that's just kind of a quick snapshot on how that works. So what's happened since that prototype? So Bentley went away and did some further development. And again, on the left side, what you're seeing is the Bentley iModel infrastructure cloud, both left and right. And in the blue or bluish color area there, what Bentley did is gave us the ability to go into the iModel and actually view quantities and validate them. So in this case, we have a seating quantity. You go out, you look at the seating quantity, and then it'll come back and highlight that area, and then an engineer can go ahead and validate that quantity. In addition to that, Bentley also gave us the ability to further decompose those elements. On this graphic, you're seeing ORD, the actual CAD file, and how it's represented in item types within the CAD file. So you see the little blue boxes there. That represents a quantity of erosion control that's actually in the graphics file. And it comes back and gives us a computed quantity of 1492. That then gets rolled up into the iModel. And now within the iModel, you can further decompose those elements into the individual shapes and entities that make up the overall pay item. So the previous graphic, you saw just this little shape here. And now you're seeing that represented within the iModel. You can come out and then validate that that is indeed what you designed. So we have the ability now within the iModel to decompose each individual element that makes up the overall item. Here's just another snapshot of that. Really, the main point of this one is to show you the overall cost estimate in the lower left corner. We push the data out to a concept in the early estimation software. It will come back and give the designer an estimate on the project, and then ultimately the overall statement of estimated quantities that we will be able to generate reports and send that information back to AASHTOWare via the OpenAPI. So what are our next steps? What do we need? When we met with Bentley in February or end of January, Bentley asked for DOTs to provide data sets. Now, let me talk a little bit more about what that is and what that looks like. So if your agency has used item types, pushed data up into an I model, Bentley would like to get a hold of that data so that they can validate and ensure that what's being done for Minnesota and Michigan is going to be providing the next data set. They want to make sure that that their prototype is working across multiple DOTs. And then we'll move into our next steps, which is the development of additional use cases, which is we get into funding, which is completing the interface to pre-construction. And there were a number of use cases that were developed from the Working Council and from other DOTs that were involved in the initial development. So those are our next steps. And just to talk about, well, when is this going to be in production? First of all, we really want to validate the process, ensure that it's not only working for MnDOT, Michigan, but we want to make sure it's working for others, other DOTs. Then we'll get some early adopters to move it into a production format, and then ultimately release it to the agencies that are interested in moving forward. During that, we will certainly be working on the additional use cases and continue to advance it forward. So my ask from the DOTs, if you do have those data sets that I talked about, would be great. If you could get that information to me. Joe is going to provide that email, I believe. We want, our goal is to go the distance. This was a snapshot of Joe Brewer swinging away for the fences here. And but yeah, we're excited about this. We really want to move it forward and look forward to the next steps. So thank you, everyone. And if you can provide any additional data, that would be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. And yeah, the only likeness I share with that picture is we share the first name. So if that would have been me, the ball would have been firmly in the catcher's mitt, not heading out the other way. So, but I appreciate the thought anyway, Todd, and thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. So you see if I can share my screen again here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. So were there any follow-up questions, I guess, for Todd before we move forward? I think people were doing a good job of answering the questions. Let me just check one last time if there were any additional questions out there. I'm not seeing any, so. Okay, again, thanks to Todd and thanks to the folks from Infotech, Chad, Nita, Hava. We appreciate that. I think those are great examples of what AASHTOWare OpenAPI can do. You know, we talked about the silos and some of the barriers, and I think these are great examples of how the OpenAPI can kind of knock those down. So thanks again. Moving on, we're going to turn it over to Cedric. Todd, I appreciate your kind words, but I think we all know the brains behind all of this stuff is Cedric and WSP. And so Cedric, I'll turn it over to you. And as always, appreciate all your efforts and all your help. So take it away, sir.
Great, thank you, Joe. So just to kind of really look back in some of the items that Joe had mentioned, we've made a ton of progress and we have so much momentum. Looking back on that first year of production, typical monthly requests maybe would hit 10,000, maybe a couple gigs would go across the wire, and we are exponentially higher with our current activity, just as a reflection of that adoption, that momentum, and really a testament to some of the amazing things that have been done by Infotech and through the different agencies, and that overall collaboration where we're able to really leverage the platform and add that additional value for these existing AASHTOWare investments. So as part of that, we're always growing, we're always attempting to improve, and the feedback that we get, we definitely act on it. So over the past few months, a lot of feedback has been coming in. You spoke, we listened. We are in the process of revamping and updating the developer portal. A lot of those new updates are in place, make things easier, more informative, and just a more ergonomic experience. This includes everything from code samples to starting point recipes, so that instead of starting from scratch, we're having to coordinate. As these good works are completed by different agencies, just go to the developer portal, check the recipe, and then you can emulate it and adjust it as needed. So again, as part of that improvement, we are adding additional technical sessions, additional and improved support, as well as the ability to access the AASHTOWare OpenAPI copilots. So this will cover everything from general assistance, giving you information about the platform, what it does, how it does it, all the way into actually generating functional code examples for you with the APIs on the fly based on whatever you need. Also, very new and exciting, the BRM API that has been released with the latest BRM update, and that traction is definitely gaining, and that new availability is something that we will continue to coordinate. Next slide. Great. So again, just kind of taking a little bit of a retrospective. When we initially started, there were probably about a dozen base cases where, for all the different use cases and wish list items, that they basically fell into one of those different 12 buckets. So far to date, we've maybe covered half of those, maybe about half a dozen of them so far. And that just indicates that there is so much more opportunity and so much more potential as we go through those different areas. And again, whenever it's done in one of those individual scenarios, it's applicable and shareable for everyone, whether it's on the commercial side or with the different agencies. Having that ability to integrate across boundaries is really significant. So what we're really looking at going forward is having that ability to leverage the self-directed agency innovation, give us more concepts, and then incorporate that with collaboration with outside industry partners like the Bentleys. So again, we've made a lot of good progress, but we know just from starting out, we haven't even touched on half of what we could do. So again, thank you very much for making the platform successful. And with the new offerings, we just hope to provide more value and more innovation as we go forward. Back to you, Joe.
Thank you, Cedric. Appreciate it. Just looking to see if we got any questions out here. So the questions out there, any plans of providing BRM API sandbox environment or to particularly try out bridge-related data, including MBI? I see you nodding your head, so go ahead, Cedric.
Sure. So some of the new BRM environments, those have been commissioned and they're underway. The lab environment, which will be a kind of general shared sandbox, what everybody can use, that is also underway. It has been deployed, but it's going through validation. Those announcements will be coming very soon. But again, that starting point with the different environments is well underway and right around the corner.
Great. Thank you, Cedric. So just a couple links here, and I think somebody in the questions had asked if these slides would be available, and I believe Tim Jennings did answer that they will be eventually. So just FYI for you. Let me jump over. So the first link there for the AASHTOWare org OpenAPI, that's more of a generic, general information about the OpenAPI. And then when you get into the developer site there, that's more specific, more detailed. So, and Cedric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if somebody gets in there and they have questions, there's an opportunity to just send a question to you and you can help them out. And I hope I'm not misstating that, because
That's it. Hit help and submit, and that's all there is to it.
so if you're interested, those are a couple links you can go to. And like I just said, you know, Cedric is available to help out if you got questions. The webinars, again, we're having AASHTOWare Connect is at the end of April, early May, and that is not 100% dedicated to the OpenAPI, but there is a lot of it will be OpenAPI. So if you're interested in finding more, there's a link to the AASHTOWare Connect site where you could get more information and consider registering and attending. And then lastly, I provided Todd's email address for those of you that want to contact Todd. It's right there, toddberglund@state.mn.us. All right. So questions, I think you've been asking them along the way and they've been getting answered. So I don't see any new ones in there. So I guess without any further ado, again, I thank all the presenters for your time and all of the folks that took the time to join us today. I hope you found this hopeful or helpful and hopeful, I guess, both, right? Again, hopefully there'll be some more of these coming. But the next big thing where you could learn more about the OpenAPI would be at AASHTOWare Connect. So with that, I thank you all. Have a good afternoon, and thank you.
Thank you, everyone.